Колеги, з останньою інформацією про події у зоні АТО, речник антитерористичної операції, полковник Андрій Lysenko. Андрій Миколаївич, прошу.
We continue our day with a briefing by Colonel Andriy Lysenko, who is the spokesperson for the anti-terrorist operation. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. On the territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, we see the decrease of the activity of gunmen who shell or fire at the positions of the units of the anti-terrorist operation. At the same time, the enemy conducts regrouping of forces and reconnaissance along the entire line, contact line. In particular, relocation, redeployment, and amassing of the forces and means of the enemy takes place in cities Stakhanov, Luhansk, and Krasny Luch. The disguised amassing of military machinery and personnel is observed in the direction of the city of Popasna and the city of Artemivsk. There is still a threat of offensive in the direction of Stanitsa Luhanska, Shastya, Lysychansk, and Mariupol. The Ukrainian armed forces are sticking to the fulfillment of Minsk agreements. Yesterday, the withdrawal of heavy armaments was started along the entire line of contact. In spite of challenge from the illegal armed formations, the Ukrainian authorities decided to make a first step to the peaceful setting of the conflict as a sign of goodwill. And as of today, 100-millimeter anti-tank cannons MT-12 Rapira are redeployed to the concentration districts not closer than 25 kilometers from the contact line. And the withdrawal is taking place under the avid monitoring of the OSCE mission. Petro Poroshenko underlined that at any moment our military are ready to get the machinery back to the front line and in a swiftest time to repel the enemy. At the same time, the gunmen, the militants are withdrawing their heavy machinery artillery only partially and to the distance that can be traversed within 30 minutes. And the OSCE mission still does not have clear information about nomenclature and the further deployment of military equipment, which makes impossible the monitoring of the withdrawal of armaments by the gunmen. The Russian and terrorist troops are conducting measures on redeployment and rotation. They strengthen their defensive lines and they amass groups of their arms. From Debaltseve, the military machinery and personnel of the gunmen is redeployed to Pisky, Marinka, and Shiroke, and from Branka to the vicinity of Debaltseve, a convoy went that had almost 100 vehicles. Also, the convoy composed of Grad multiple rocket launchers and other military machinery moved from Donetsk in direction of Mariupol. Over the trains from Russian Federation with military machinery and ammunition come through the railway station Ilovaisk. Over the last 24 hours, 3 Ukrainian military died and 7 were wounded. The so-called 17th Russian humanitarian convoy invaded the territory of Ukraine and through crossing points Izvarina and Uspenka Ukraine was entered by 2 convoys of this humanitarian convoy, composed of 170 vehicles. 41 vehicles were transporting fuel and oils, and 2 of them were transporting literature of unknown content. The special services of Ukraine are liquidating enemy subversive agents. In Luhansk region, the counterintelligence have discovered a agent in the ranks of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine who was correcting fire of terrorist artillery against the settlements of Stanitsa Luhanska district of Luhansk region. The detained person confessed that representatives of Russian special services promised him a leading position in one of quasi-state structures of the bandit formation LNR. Now he will be a rank-and-file prisoner in a Ukrainian jail. Also in Luhansk region, in a local residence house, the Ukrainian special services found a storage of ammunition. They found 10 hand grenades, 2 mines, artillery, gunpowder, and also a trinityrtoluol and 4 grenade launcher grenades. Yesterday, the President of Ukraine signed 2 decrees on awarding Ukrainian military servicemen and border guards and servicemen of the Ministry of Interior and the State Service of Emergency Situations, and in particular for heroic defense of Debaltseve. In general, over 300 military were awarded, 70 of them posthumously. The measures to raise the combat capacity of the Ukrainian army are going on, and all the fighters of the National Guards of Ukraine who are in training are being trained to serve in road checkpoints in the anti-terrorist operation zone. They are trained to shoot, and also Ukrainian commanders continue their training in one of the testing grounds in Zhytomyr region, and they are
the military are trained under the leadership of the experienced instructors who participated directly in anti-terrorist operation. For the first time since the Second World War, because of the Russian aggression, the interns of Ukrainian military universities are graduating earlier than planned. Yesterday in Kharkiv University of the Air Force, named after Kozhedub, there was the early graduation. More than 300 officers were graduated 4 months earlier. Today, the graduation ceremony was held in the National University of Defense, named after Chernyakhovsky. Petro Poroshenko participated in this ceremony. The decision on shortening the term of training, early graduation of officers, is based on one thing: the armed forces of Ukraine need you badly. That is what the commander-in-chief said to the young officers. Ukrainian patriots help our defenders. The artists of Chernigiv region were raising money for the needs of the servicemen of the armed forces of Ukraine. The organizers raised about 40,000 hryvnias and transferred them to volunteers who help our military. They are planning to purchase an excavator for our servicemen. Besides, the artists of Chernigiv region transferred to the 13th Battalion the truck Gas 66. And the volunteers of Energodar transferred to the servicemen the vehicle KAMAZ, which is re-equipped for hygienic and everyday needs of the personnel. It has 2 diesel generators, 5 laundry machines, heater for the building, and another laundry. This equipment is absolutely needed for our servicemen in field conditions, and thanks to one mobile laundry, around 400 people will be able to launder their clothes. Also, the Lviv engineers bought a modern van to evacuate soldiers from the battlefield. This van can take up to 29 seriously wounded servicemen. The veterans of Kramatorsk raised the money for wounded servicemen who are in Artemis Hospital. This money will be used to buy the syringes and the antiseptics. Also, after the criminal artillery shelling on the 10th of February, the activists created the medical 100 of Kramatorsk. Thanks to that, all those who are willing to provide medical assistance to the victims can become members of this medical 100. The rotation of the servicemen of anti-terrorist operation continues. The unit of law enforcement servicemen from Volyn returned from ATO zone. They were exercising their tasks on protecting the public order in Kramatorsk when the militants were shelling at the peaceful quarters of the city. Thanks to the actions of this unit, they managed to avoid more victims. Humanitarian assistance continues to come to Donbass. 2 trucks with humanitarian assistance passed the Kurakhova crossing point. The transportation vehicles from the Red Cross were brought the medication of the total weight of 36 tons. This cargo goes to Donetsk. On the 25th of May 2014, the commander of mechanized battalion with the nickname Escadron started a new life. This day he got to the war in the ATO zone. At that time he was the commander of the platoon, and he was defending one of the checkpoints. The guys were executing their task perfectly well. Escadron became the commander of the battalion, a very modest officer. Escadron talks about his military successes. He believes that that is just a regular military work for a man. The commander of the 93rd Brigade tells about the commander Escadron. He managed to get together all people, and his first serious battle he waged near Krasnoarmeysk. The Escadron developed and planned and executed the operation very well. The commander of battalion says, we are all people, we are made of one dough, but we are iron, especially those who have iron nerves. I have the best soldiers in ATO zone. The international community observes the implementation of Minsk agreements. The Jens Stoltenberg, the General Secretary of NATO, welcomes the decrease of intensity of military actions in Ukraine, but requires that Ukraine removes thousands units of heavy weaponry which were brought to Donbass earlier. He stated that any attempts to expand the occupied territories in Ukraine will be unacceptable for international community. Federica Mogherini stated that the EU in the nearest weeks will concentrate all their efforts to achieve complete implementation of Minsk agreements. She stated that if the situation in the east of Ukraine worsens, then the European Union can increase the pressure on Russia and militants in Ukraine. The Special Monitoring Mission of OSCE registers critical humanitarian situation in Debaltseve. Almost all buildings in the center are ruined or very seriously damaged, and the local citizens feel the big need in renewing water, gas, and electricity supply. Your questions, please.
Any questions, colleagues? Channel 17. We know that recently the fighters of Brigade 128 came out of Debaltseve. Some of them are in Kiev, some of them are at home, and we invited two of them to our studio. And, you know, they said that when there was a Debaltseve, that Ukrainians were misinformed about the situation in Debaltseve. So what is the gist of the question? Whether there was they said that that Ukrainian troops were surrounded there, and you were telling everybody that they were not. And this was during the Minsk talks. Yes, there was our troops were surrounded near Debaltseve, and the classic cattle was in Ilovaisk. As far as Debaltseve is concerned, there were several routes of withdrawal that were not controlled by the gunmen, and we used those ways to withdraw our troops. Yes, those guys who were in the rear guard and defended positions while the rest were withdrawing, you know, they sustained the biggest pressure, and also they are real heroes, and there's a great gratitude to them. We cannot now talk about the classic cattle, not cattle. Please, there were several ways of withdrawal, at least according to our intelligence service, and they were providing for the withdrawal of our forces. Reuters television. How much time do we need, the Ukrainian side, to withdraw the heavy armaments? And the separatists spread the rumors that the official Kiev has asked for more time. As far as I remember, the Minsk agreements, we have a week to withdraw the heavy armaments. We still don't have a day where they didn't shoot or fire, so there is a violation of Minsk agreements. But yesterday, the Ukrainian authorities decided to demonstratively withdraw our heavy armaments, and we have already done this partially, and we expect the enemy to do the same. We will do everything to protect our guys who are still on the front line if the enemy does not do the same. And our units that have small firearms are still in their positions. Dear spokesperson of the Council for National defense and security. Could you please tell us, according to the Minsk agreements, there is a stipulation for bilateral withdrawal of artillery, rocket units, and so on. But please tell us, over this period of time, the Ukrainian side, did they have an opportunity to use military helicopters, satellites, and the rest? Do we have such an opportunity, or we have exhausted our opportunities? The Minsk agreements stipulate the ban on the use of military aircraft in the anti-terrorist operation zone. We were waiting and gave an opportunity to the enemy to use the opportunity to stop fire. And we used only medical aircraft to transport our heavily wounded guys from the front line to our hospitals so that they get urgent medical help. And it is due to medical helicopters and planes that we were able to save hundreds of lives of our fighters. Dear colleagues, the next briefing on the situation in the anti-terrorist operation zone is tomorrow.